we are here. It's Toto. I wonder what it is everywhere else, but hey, Krishna Surya Sam, Maya Haya Andakara. Wherever Krishna is present, there's no darkness. So the sun is, so we should be okay. Um, so we're going to continue with Srila Prabhupada's introduction to Bhagavad Gita, continuing from where Ananda Prabhu left off. Let's try and find that. Before we begin, we will chant our invocation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from the introduction. On my little book, it's 20, but different versions or different, how do we say, edition, better word, of Bhagavad Gita. Some are bigger, some are smaller. Mine is relatively small print and so on. But we'll just pick up the last part of what Atmananda Prabhu was speaking yesterday and then lead into what we're going to today. Om Agana Timarandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chakshuran Militam Ye Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, and my spiritual masters forced me to open my eyes with the torchlight of transcendental knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto his lotus feet. So, jumping in, speaking, yet Bhagavad Gita does not advise us to go to any of the planets in this material world. So we've been discussing a lot about the different demigods and offering different kinds of worship. Yanti Deva, Vrata Devan, etc. The moon, the sun, the star, higher planets are called Svarga. Different statuses on those planets. There's of the planets, higher, middle, and lower. The Earth belongs to the middle ones. How to travel to those different places is explained. You don't need a machine, but you just worship the different demigods, and you can take birth in those planets. But the Bhagavad Gita doesn't advise us to go to any of the planets in this material world. Why? Because, Prabhupada continues, even if we go to Brahmaloka, the highest planet, through some sort of mechanical contrivance, by maybe traveling for 40,000 years, and Prabhupada in brackets, it says, and who would live that long for 40,000 years, we will still find the material inconveniences of birth, death, disease, and old age. But one who wants to approach the supreme planet, Krishnaloka, or any other planet within the spiritual sky, will not meet with these material inconveniences. So we're going to be continuing on from there. It's interesting. It's just like a travel brochure. They present very nice pictures, and one becomes allured by the descriptions and images that you see and think, well, maybe I should go there. So you have to pay a certain price and you can maybe go there. So in a similar way, Krishna is introducing his pastimes, and he's speaking and describing the supreme abode in the spiritual sky, from where, when one goes, one never returns again to this material world. Mama Petya Purna Jama Dukhalayam Shashvatam Napnuvanti Mahatmana Sam. The Paramam Gatir, or the supreme abode, one doesn't return from that place. Why? Because I think I've explained, I used to live in Glasgow, Scotland, and to be honest, it wasn't such a wonderful environment, especially when one's fully surrounded by material life and engaged in material life. And then I immigrated, and Srila Prabhupada had mentioned, he said, like London, he said, for example, England, especially, and London, it's always raining, it's always cloudy and dark, and so on. You get a summer, and we used to joke about it that I went to the library and last week, and I missed summer. Means it was there one afternoon. So summer comes and it's gone. Not always, but pretty much. It's a pretty wet, miserable sort of place. So when you come out of such a place, and we emigrated to Australia to begin with, where um, my friends and I ran to the beach, and we asked, "Why is no one here? There's no one at the beach." And because it wasn't the beach weather for the Australian people, but for people who lived in the UK, it was we thought it was wonderful. So when you get a higher taste, you get the param drisvanavart, and the embodied soul may be restricted from sense objects. Taste remains, but ceasing those engaged by a higher taste, you can remain fixed in consciousness. So when we get that higher taste, then we realize that that's the place that we should be going to. So those material inconveniences are not there. In many verses, that is also explained, that the material, the goal of the devotees is param gatim, not the place where there is padam padam yad vipadam natesham. There's danger at every step, but the goal is param padam padam. It's the place where there are no material miseries. So there is such a place, and it's not in Hawaii. It's not in Fiji. I've told that story 10 times. When I went to Fiji, the biggest building that I could see was a hospital, and I thought, oh, it's not the paradise after all. The biggest building I could see in Lautoka at that time was the hospital. So it was clear message that even in places where it's like a paradise, especially that was before any coups in Fiji, it was pretty much like a paradise. But the biggest place is a hospital. So from the highest planet, we just read earlier, Amananda, I think was discussing that yesterday, from the highest planet to the lowest planet, all the places of misery. Why? Because repeated birth, old age, disease, and death are taking place wherever you are in the material sphere. So intelligent person will, when hearing about a higher existence, will become very inspired. But one who wants to approach the supreme planet, Krishna Loka, or any other planet within the spiritual sky will not meet with these material inconveniences. It's important. I'll just mention now, again, you get this strong desire for liberation, to become liberated or freed from our material situation. But that has to become qualified, and that's the whole process of devotional service explained in Bhagavad Gita, that one may want freedom from material distress, and that's okay. Krishna says, that's fine. He said, you may be distressed, you may be in search of wealth, you may be in search of knowledge, and you may be just inquisitive, and those you may just be motivated by those things, because it says that's okay, that's pious. Take shelter of me, and gradually you become freed from those lower things. Dhruva Maharaj, he wanted the kingdom greater than his grandfather, so he wanted the greatest kingdom. But when he gained the darshan of the Lord, he said, my Lord, I was desirous of broken pieces of glass in comparison to the jewel that I've found now in your association. So Krishna is encouraging that we have to start the process, and that's okay, that one should want to become freed from this Jama Mricha Jara Vyadi, the birth, death, disease, and old age. So continuing now for today, Srila Prabhupada's introduction. Amongst all of the planets in the spiritual sky, there is one supreme planet called Goloka Vrindavan, the original planet in the abode, the original personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. All of this information is given in Bhagavad Gita. And we are given through its instruction information how to leave the material world and begin a truly blissful life in the spiritual sky. We're invited to go on a journey. Srila Prabhupada continuing, in the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the real picture of the material world is given. It is said there, Urdhva mulam adha shakham ashvatam prahur avyayam chandhamsi yasya parnani yastam veda savedalit. Here the material world is described as a tree whose roots are upwards and branches are below. We have experience of a tree whose roots are upwards. If one stands on the bank of a river or any reservoir of water, you can see that the trees reflected in the water are upside down. The branches go downwards and the roots upwards. Similarly, this material world is a reflection of the spiritual world. This is such an important short sentence. Similarly, this material world is a reflection of the spiritual world. Yesterday, I was listening to the Madhya Lila Chaitanya Charita, where Lord Chaitanya is hearing from Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is speaking Bhagavatam, and he's described to be the most learned scholar in the whole of India at that time. He was seated there in Jagannath Puri, the advisor and priest to the king of Orissa, and he was explaining Bhagavatam. And after 7 days, he was beginning to speak more. He said to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, "My dear sir, you've been listening for 7 days, but you haven't said anything, and I'm not sure if you're understanding what I'm explaining in the Bhagavatam." And Lord Chaitanya said, "I can understand the words of the Bhagavatam, but your explanations I cannot understand." And in this way, the Lord goes on to explain this difference of the Vaishnav Siddhanta, or the conclusion of Vaishnav philosophy, in comparison to Sankaracharya's impersonal concept. And he points out in so many ways. And Sarvabhauma goes on arguing with the Lord back and forward, explaining, debating, and so on and so, until he finally is baffled. The Lord eventually is speaking from the Atmarama verse. After a long discourse back and forward, discussing Chaitanya Charitamrita discusses all the philosophical points. And then they come to the Atmarama verse. And by this time, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is saying, "My Lord," I'm not sure if he addressed him as my Lord. I think he did. He's nearly there. He said, at least he said, my dear Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, please explain the Atmarama verse. I'm very interested to hear. So he'd heard so much and he thought, wow, so let me hear the Atmarama verse. But the Lord said, actually, I'd like to hear from you. Please, you speak this verse. I have very little knowledge, so please let me hear from you. So after he had explained the Atmarama verse in so many different ways, Lord Chaitanya again explained, I cannot understand why you're speaking in this way. And he began to explain the Atmarama verse. And he didn't touch on any of the explanations. He didn't argue against, that was what Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was doing. He was simply trying to refute or argue against what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had spoken. And Lord Chaitanya didn't do that. When he heard from Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he didn't just simply try to argue to defeat the argument, but he presented new arguments, many arguments. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya by this time was totally over. He said the intelligent, this is not possible for an ordinary human being to give all these different explanations. And to cut that story short, which was not short, but to cut it, Lord Chaitanya very soon after reveals his identity and manifests. This is after Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya surrenders to the Lord, but he reveals a four-armed form to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. He embraces Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, and then he manifests this form, and yeah, it's an amazing description. So he's explaining this, that this idea of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya coming from Sankaracharya, who's specifically empowered in the age of Kali as an incarnation of Lord Shiva to bewilder the conditioned souls by the presentation of Mayavad philosophy, which says that everything is Nirviseshvad, and it's very close to the Buddhist philosophy of Sunya. Sunya and Nirvishesh is very similar. Buddhism is saying that there's only nirvana, or liberation, annihilation of everything. There's nothing, ultimately, dismantle everything. And the Nirviseshvad says that no, there is a supreme, but that supreme is formless, without qualities, without forms, without variegatedness, etc., etc. So it's a covered atheism, and Buddhism is a straight atheism. It says, yeah, like that, big discussions. Anyway, so the Vaishnava philosophy is explained here. This material world is a reflection of the spiritual world, but it's upside down. We'll hear more. Prabhupada says, the material world is but a shadow of reality. In the shadow, there is no reality or substantiality. But from the shadow, or the reflection, we can understand that there are substance and reality. So we use that example of look at the reflection of the trees on the riverbank in the water. It gives us a clear idea that there's a tree on the riverbank. But if you try to touch that tree, pick any of its fruits in the water, it has no substantiality. But it doesn't mean that there's nothing. Oh, there's nothing here in this water. There's no tree. So there's no tree. So the conclusion of the I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted. There's a cycle coming up. I don't want to ignore the man. I think it might be someone I know. Hi. Where were we? The reflection. Yes, the reflection. So it has no substantiality. But so the Mayavad philosophy, Sankaracharya is presenting that because it has no substantiality and no reality in and of itself, then the spiritual realm is without that variegatedness and illusion. But actually, Vaishnava philosophy is explaining, no, the material has no lasting permanence, but it indicates the variegatedness of the spiritual world, where it is manifest from. So it's very beautifully explained. And Prabhupada goes on to use another analogy. He says, but from the shadow we can understand that there are substance and reality. In the desert, there is no water, but the mirage suggests that there is such a thing as water. In the material world, there is no water, there is no happiness, but the real water of actual happiness is there in the spiritual world. So it's a nice way Srila Prabhupada saying that. In the material world, there is no water, there is no happiness. We're comparing water to happiness. Obviously, if you're in the desert, the happiest thing would be water. So there's no water, there's no happiness. But the real water of actual happiness is there in the spiritual world. So just like that mirage, the foolish animal, without no understanding, he sees, oh, there's water, and they wander off into the desert. And as they go forward further, the mirage seems to be a little bit further away, and they go on like that. But there's actually no water. It's a mirage. It's an illusion. And we chase after and the animal dies. And yeah, and even under, we've seen some films, I'm sure, when you were young or whenever, that somebody wanders off, a human being wanders off due to the heat stroke in the desert, and they think, oh, there's water over here, and again, you lose everything. So we hear in the material world, and the mirage is that there's pleasure here, and there is, but it's a reflection, it's a perverted reflection of real pleasure. So there's the anticipation, there's the excitement, but it doesn't deliver the satisfaction. So the idea is that we're supposed to gain satisfaction, just like we eat a certain amount of food and there's a certain satisfaction. Although that's very small also, that sense, isn't it? And you just have to eat just a little fraction too much. And that's the tendency because we want more, isn't it? You take prasadam, you sit down to eat, and then anticipation is there, the excitement, I'm going to enjoy this, it looks good and everything's good, got it all. And then you eat and then, oh, this is pretty, yeah, this is good. I like this. I'm going to feel really satisfied if I keep eating. So you keep eating, and then you get to a point where there's a place where you think, mm, mm, uh, yes, I'm feeling this kind of position where there's a little bit of satisfaction, but I'd like a lot more of that. And then you find yourself in this place that what it delivered was not quite the ecstasy that we thought. It's just a little bit of satisfaction. And if you're not real careful, you're going to eat too much and you're going to suffer. And Prabhupada does give the example that by overindulgence in products, one has to use another milk product, yogurt, to the problems caused by the original milk products. So this is the way of the chasing the mirage. Now I've got to get back to this thing. The sun's come out and all the rest of it. I got to find the place where I was. Let's see if I can find a place where there's no shining. Where were we? Oh boy. Blissful Life in the Spiritual Sky 15. Okay. Got it. But the mirage suggests there is such a thing as water. In the material world, there is no water, there is no happiness, but the real water of actual happiness is in the spiritual world. The Lord suggests that we attain the spiritual world in the following manner. So here we go. Got the idea, we've got the travel brochure. We're hearing about this, and it makes sense. Reflected material world, we try to gain the happiness, we don't find the real satisfaction, the depth of satisfaction that we want, and we're being pushed by time to get old age, and then with old age we suffer some diseases more and more, and then death comes, and then we haven't really pondered deep enough. So this is the way the Lord suggests how we can attain the spiritual world in the following manner. Bhagavad Gita 15:5. Nirmana mohajita sangadosha adhyatma nitya vinivrita kama dvanver vimukta shakha dukkha samjne gachanti amudha padam avyayam tat. That padam avyayam, or eternal kingdom, can be reached nirmana moha. What does this mean? We are after designations. Someone wants to become Sir. Someone wants to become Lord. Someone wants to become the president or a rich man or a king or something else. So this is, continue. As long as we are attached to these designations, we are attached to the body because designations belong to the body. But we are not these bodies, and realizing this is the first stage in spiritual realization. So it's the first stage, but it's the on, and it has to be remembered constantly. It's a preliminary stage in one sense, but it continues. We have to hold that, and it's not easy to hold, um, as we've been discussing. To hold these realizations requires a constant endeavor. Tivrena Bhakti Yoga, the intense practice of devotional service, and the beginning of it is this to understand that I'm not this body. Okay, so if I'm not this body, then what am I? Jivara Svarupoi Nichara Krishna. That's I am eternally the servant of the Supreme Person. So that's the next thing to understand. And there's so many things, points to be understood in this process of Bhakti Yoga, but it's all pivoting around this misconception of being the body. Deha patra kalatradeshu atmasamyeshu asatsvapi. Like that. The deha, the body. Deha patya, the children. Deha patya kalatradeshu. Kalatra is the wife. And they're described in the Bhagavatam as fallible soldiers. That although we are sufficiently experienced, we don't see their inevitable destruction. Pashyanapi na pashyati. So we surround ourselves, we don't inquire to the higher aspects of life, but we surround ourselves with fallible soldiers, such as this body. And although we're sufficiently experienced, we read about it, we hear about it, we in so many ways, we still cling on to these fallible soldiers in the form of the body itself, the children generated from this body who can protect us with their youth. As we go into old age, they will protect us. And our wife or our husband will be able to protect us. But they're described as fallible soldiers. They're soldiers, but they're fallible. And everything in the material world is of that nature. So as long as we are attached to these designations, we are attached to the body because designations belong to the body. And we think in that way. Prabhupada's saying, someone wants to become sir, someone wants to be known as Lord something, one wants to be a king or a president, a rich man, designations of the body, and thinking that those different designations can protect me. But no, sir, it cannot. Continuing, we are associated with the three modes of material nature, but we must become detached through devotional service to the Lord. If we are not attached to devotional service to the Lord, then we cannot become detached from the modes of material nature. Very important point again. The only way to become detached from the three modes of material nature is to become attached to the devotional service of the Lord. This is the transcendental position. If we're not in the transcendental position of service to the Supreme, then we are influenced either by goodness, passion, or ignorance. And those modes of material nature, they're all functioning around this bodily identification. Modes of material nature. Designations and attachments are due to our lust and desire. Designations and attachments are due to our lust and desire, our wanting to lord it over the material nature. As long as we do not give up this propensity of lording it over material nature, there is no possibility of returning to the kingdom of the Supreme, the Sanatan Dham. So that's the prerequisite. We have to give up our strong desire to lord it over the material nature. And by seeing the futility of it, so we've got that strong desire to become a rich man, a lord, a king, somebody of note in this world, but it's temporary. So why don't we, instead of serving this material nature and these desires that we have, seeing the futility of that, instead of that, we hear that there's another process, another way of living your life, and that is to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead and gain entrance into this possibility of going beyond this material manifestation. But this requires atma tattva, knowledge of the self, but devoid of tattva do not inquire into the real problems that busy themselves with all the immediate problems that they're faced with, the child faced with as a youth. It's all problems. Yeah, if you're a child, you got a lot of problems. You haven't got this, you haven't got that. If you're a youth, you've different problems you're faced with in youth. Trying to fit in, trying to find the right person to be with in life. Then you may get married, or you're with somebody, and then you got problems, and it goes on. So the problems are always there. So knowing or gaining that experience, we should realize, yes, this is very interesting, that this human form of life, I'm able to spend some time dealing with the problems, but I'm seeing that they come and go. They will always come. Yeah. So, but let that not be my main focus. Let my main focus be going back home, back to Godhead, making progress on the spiritual platform, and your other things in the material sphere will happen, and that's the amazing grace of the Supreme. As long as we do not give up this propensity of lording it over material nature, there is no possibility of returning to the kingdom of the Supreme, the Sanatan Dham. That eternal kingdom, which is never destroyed, can be approached by one who is not bewildered by the attractions of false material enjoyments, who is situated in the service of the Supreme Lord. Bhogaishvarya prashaktanam taya parita cheta samvyavasayat mikabudhi samado navidiyate. Bhagavad Gita says that one who's bewildered by desires for material enjoyment and opulence, is bewildered by such things, cannot perform devotional service. I'm trying to remember, I'm getting distracted again, but not to worry. Bhogashvarya prashat. Bhoga is sense enjoyment, and Aishvarya is material opulence. In the minds of those who are too attracted to material enjoyment and material opulence, and who are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination for devotional service does not take place. So it requires a resolution. One has to make a resolve that this is the direction I need to go in. So it might be a 180 turnaround from where we were heading. It requires quite strong resolution to do that, and not to become bewildered by these sense gratifications and material opulences, because it's coming and it goes. We come into the world with nothing, we leave with nothing. We may accumulate this, that, and the next thing, but it will go. And even the body we're existing in, I have to go. Where will I go? I don't know. That's the honest truth of the matter. People don't know. Where will I go? And there's a big debate of life after death. Oh, I don't know if there is, etc. It's about the extent for many people. They get stuck on that point. And Krishna's making it very clear through Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is so powerful, isn't it? Dehinosmin yata dehe komanam yovanam jara. Right from the beginning, when Arjuna surrenders to Krishna, he begins to instructing. He's saying that you're speaking learned words, but you're lamenting for that which is not worthy of grief. The wise lament neither for the living nor the dead. And he goes on to explain that you're going from boyhood to youth to old age. Similarly, the soul goes into another body at death. The self-realized persons are not bewildered by this change of body. We're not bewildered if we change from childhood to youth, although it's quite bewildering in many ways. But yeah, and from youth to old age, and simply this change of body is going on perpetually. It's going on. Self-realized souls are not bewildered by this, and they're fixed. Vyavasaya mika buddhi. Ekeha Kurunandana. So, can only be approached by one who is not bewildered by the attractions of false material enjoyments, who is situated in the service of the Supreme Lord. One so situated can easily approach that supreme abode. Okay, so I'm going to not go any further because I'm covered a reasonable amount of ground here. Prabhupada will, but somebody else can explain that part. Okay, so we've got the invitation on behalf of Lord Sri Krishna. Srila Prabhupada is pouring his heart out in this introduction to Bhagavad Gita as it is, and showing us the clarity of what's contained in Bhagavad Gita. I think I was listening to Dhruva Maharaja speaking just yesterday, I think it was, in one lecture, and he was making the point. He said he always encourages people when they pick up Bhagavad Gita to reserve their opinion until it's completed. And he's saying if you can encourage people to read Bhagavad Gita, but it's a challenge. The Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, all these shastras, they throw down great challenges to the conditioned soul. He becomes challenged by a lot of the statements that are there, and when you hear them, one may run away. It's because you've got two choices. One is to deal with it, to face the truth as it appears in the pages of Bhagavad Gita, and then to make value judgments of that and make clear choices as to what to do when presented with this knowledge and understanding. One is to run away and put it down, and the other is to read through the Bhagavad Gita in its totality. And if you do that, chances are you'll be convinced, very, very solidly convinced by what's being presented. So that is our desired goal, Padam Avyayam, the eternal place, the eternal goal, and to give up this struggle for existing in the material world, whether it be chained by iron handcuffs or gold handcuffs, by a very wonderful bodily constitution or not. It is the material world after all, and it has no lasting substantiality, just like that reflection of the tree standing on the bank reflected in water. And you can see that many pictures. I was looking at one picture. It was in the back, the Godhead magazine. And it was a reflection. You see those pictures of mountain range with forest and stuff, and it reflects on a big lake. And it's this exact mirror. It's a mirror image, but it has there's nothing to it. But it is fully dependent on the actual mountain range and forest from where that reflection is coming. So similarly, this world is temporary. It's filled with what it's filled with, but it gives us a very clear idea of the spiritual abode. And in that spiritual abode, there is no envy, but there is love. And that's the quality that we require to develop to enable us to go there. That's the payment. Humility and development of love, so that we can enter into that place where there's only loving pastimes. That's the reserve at the entrance to the spiritual world. Is, do we have love in our hearts? Have we freed ourselves from the lust and envy which drives us to compete on and on in the material atmosphere? So it's amazing how many times we can rise up beaten down by the material energy, but again we come up and we just continue in that way until Brahmanda Brahmatikuna Bhavanaji Guru Krishna Prasad Pai Bhakti Lata Bija. we manage somehow or other by the mercy. You could say, again, that's another big debate. We must have done something pious in a past life to get this opportunity. Maybe, maybe not, because the mercy of the pure devotees on behalf of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Haridas Thakur, the Goswamis, they're distributing the pure love of God to the very unqualified personalities. So that's the business of Krishna. That's the business of Krishna's devotees, is to distribute, pardon me, Parapakar, the supreme welfare work, and to distribute it freely, whether it's qualified or not qualified. It doesn't matter. Kirata Hunandra Palinda Pulkasha, one may be in the lowest condition of life, but it is possible by the mercy of the devotee. The power of Krishna himself comes through those pure, unalloyed devotees and is able to uplift anyone and everyone despite their material situation. So we should just be, continuing to rejoice. And we can see Krishna. How do you see Krishna? He says so many ways. Learn how to see me, learn how to know me, how to love me. You can develop that love, isn't it? Patvam palam toyam yome bhakti prayachiti. Krishna says, offer me a little leaf, a flower, fruit, or water with love. If there's some feeling developed that, please, my Lord, you're giving everything. Just like a child is offering some sweet back to mom or dad who's given them a bag of sweets or lollies or whatever they call them, and the child offer one's back. The parent has no need of anything from the child, but the giving with a loving sentiment. Oh, mommy, you take that, or daddy, you have this. Krishna wants. He doesn't need our offerings, but gradually we learn that. And to see Krishna, he says, don't be so anxious to see me immediately, because you'll blow it again. You'll say something wrong, you'll make some offense. Learn to see me in the light of the sun and the moon. Learn to see me, the beautiful flowers and trees, the oceans. All these vibhutis are energies of the Lord, are manifestations of his beauty, until gradually you'll see more and more as we engage in the process, where we're able to more and more appreciate the form of the Lord. I'm just thinking many devotees, they say that when they first went to see the Lord, all they could see was the flowers. They could hardly, flowers and the decorations and so on and so forth. And then gradually we become accustomed to seeing the Lord's lotus feet, and gradually see the shining face of the Lord eventually, like that. So we'll continue on the path. We feel blessed that Srila Prabhupada has given his life to save us in this introduction of Bhagavad Gita. We're gaining so much. So we'll finish there. If anyone, I'll just check if anyone's got any. I meant to say at the beginning, but there was no one online at that time. There's a few people on now. So I was going to say, see if you can, if you've got something as you go, there might be a point that you could put up in the chat box. So we'll just see. I pressed that button. It takes ages in my little phone for it to come through if there's anything. But it would be good next time. Oh, what we got? Oh, something else has come up on the phone. That's the way of it. But I can't see anything as yet. But anyway, yes, help. So that I'll even if it's not for today, don't worry. But if next time you're on, if when we're speaking, if you've got some point, then please just pencil it down if you've got a pencil, or you can do it straight on the phone, whatever, whatever technology, simple or a little more complicated, and then put it into the chat box, and then you can share that, and it would help to broaden the conversation. I can speak a little about what you're saying, or try and get some inspiration from it, or just share it with everyone else. And that would be, I think that would be a good step forward. So I will try once more to press this little button that somehow or other should do something, but I had a lot of trouble earlier actually to go live. I was pressing the go live button and it just nothing was happening. And then eventually it takes so long somehow. I know Arjuna tells me I've got to get a new phone, but hey, what to say? Maybe it's right. Okay, so I'm not seeing anything, and that's absolutely fine. So we'll finish at that point, and wish everyone a good day. And don't forget Krishna. Always remember Krishna. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Sila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Kod Vaishnava Brinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna Prabhus.